everyone, Mary Collette Rogers here, Healthy Kitchen Companion, and today I'm here to make a recipe with you for simple chocolate strawberry dessert. This recipe came to me this spring when strawberries are in season. You know, they come in season around May, and I bought some and enjoyed them for a couple of days just plain. But then I got to feeling like, oh, I just needed a little bit more for my dessert. And you know, I'm all for having just fruit for dessert, but every now and then you just want a little bit more. And so I wonder, do you ever feel like that? Well, if you do, then this recipe is for you. Now, I feel good about sharing it because it's not a dessert recipe that's a nutritional black hole. Number one, there are no processed sugars or flour in it, which is the problem with a lot of dessert recipes. Number two, it builds on the good nutrition of fruits and coconut. And number three, it includes chocolate. Because to my mind, a dessert recipe isn't really a satisfying dessert unless it has a little bit of chocolate. And of course, chocolate is good for us. Now, there's a couple of other really good things about this recipe too, though. Another one of those is that it's really quick to make. So quick that you can make it after dinner, so it doesn't interfere and take time away from making a vegetable-rich meal. And then the other thing that I really love about it is that it's got automatic portion control, you might say. You'll see that the recipe itself is just for one serving. And so conceivably, after you have one serving, you could go back and make another one. But even though it's pretty quick and easy, I think there's just enough of a time barrier that you wouldn't go do that. So you get that automatic portion control, and especially if you'll put away all your ingredients before you eat it. So let's go ahead and get started. As we do, I want you to pay attention to a couple of questions. The first of those is, why is it really easy for me to be able to put this recipe together in just a couple minutes? The second of those questions is, do you notice the unwritten tricks and tips that I'm sharing with you? They're not part of the recipe, but nevertheless they're going to make it a lot easier for you to make the recipe and come out with good results. So just keep those in mind as we go on. Okay, as we start a recipe, one of the best things to do is to start with an overview. Get your game plan down, know where you're going, know how you're going to get there. And you know, it's called simple for a reason. This is a pretty simple recipe. Pretty much it's going to be getting some dates, some coconut, and some strawberries, and chopping them up with a little cinnamon, cocoa powder, and a mint leaf if you'd like that as well. Pretty simple, right? But here's the thing, that even this simple recipe has so much to teach. It's got cooking tips, it's got kitchen smart know-how. We're going to talk about kitchen smart later, how to be kitchen smart. It's got buying tips that you can learn. It has got some nutritional insights that you can learn. And all of this stuff that is kind of this unwritten stuff is part of your cooking knowledge database. And you're going to get to add a lot to your database. And what's neat is it's not going to help with just this recipe. It's going to help with a lot of recipes. And that's why I'm kind of excited to share all that. So let's go to step one, and as you'll see, there's 2 rows in this recipe, and those are each of the 2 steps. So the first row involves the dates and the coconut. Over here, those are your ingredients. What we're going to be doing is processing the dates and coconut in the chopper attachment of an immersion blender until the dates are chopped into small pieces. So let's go ahead and get started on that. Let's start with the equipment, the piece of equipment that's called for, and that's a chopper attachment of an immersion blender. Now, a lot of you might know what an immersion blender is. Typically, most people, if they have one, they have at least this unit of the immersion blender, and this is great for, you know, using it with a cup to make sauces and soups and puree soups and things like that. But if you don't have one of these, or if this is the only piece you have, I really suggest considering buying the 3-piece set, because there's also a whisk that you can buy, so you can easily beat egg whites if you want to, pancake mix, things like that. And then there's also the chopper attachment, which is what we're going to use today. And there's a little blade right inside there that we can see, and that's what we're going to be chopping up the dates with. And it's just nice because this part goes on each one of the different components. Now, In terms of a buying note, mine is a 200 watt. And wattage is important. It's a good distinguishing factor between different models. 200 watts has been plenty of power for me, but I noticed that nowadays they've got them more like 350 and 400 watts. So know that you're probably going to be just fine with that. I've never felt like I didn't have enough enough power with 200 watts. The brand I'm using is Braun, and I have had this thing for, at least 10, maybe a dozen years. Had no problems with it, still working great. So that could be a good brand to start looking at. So using the chopper attachment of an immersion blender is pretty darn easy. There's no complication here. You simply push the button and away it goes. But there are a couple tips I want to share with you, actually 3 of them, that will make your chopping results more successful. The first of those is that when you're going to be chopping a larger item, like a date like this, and something maybe that's a little harder, rough cut it before you put it in the chopper. Number 2, process in pulses rather than just holding the button down. And number 3, scrape the bowl on occasion as you're processing. And you're going to see all these in action in just a minute. Okay, and by the way, remember I said that a lot of what you're going to learn is good for other recipes too. The tricks I'm teaching you are good whether you're using just a little mini chopper like this or a big chopper like my Cuisinart, a food processor over there. Same rules apply. Okay, so let's go ahead and we'll start with those dates, and we're going to do, this is where tip number 1 comes up right immediately, and we're going to go ahead and do some rough cuts on these dates. And of course, first I want to slice them down. I'm just using a little paring knife for this, that's plenty. And then I slice it open and then I can pull out the pit. And I think you would know that, but just in case, we'll start with that. And while I'm cutting these up, I want to talk a little bit about the nutrition of dates. Because here's the fact is that dates, this is called a medjool date. And the fact is these are kind of like the king of dates. They're very rich and very sweet. But in addition to having really great taste, they also have great nutrition. In fact, I was looking on a website for Dr. Collette, and he talked about the many different benefits of dates. And I'm going to read them because I'm not very good at remembering this kind of stuff. But these wonderful dates have iron for your blood, fiber for roughage, vitamin A for your eyes, potassium for your heart, B vitamins, and tannins. And these are just some of the benefits. And so Dr. Mercola, this is the reason why he calls dates one of the healthiest foods in the world. So isn't that amazing? So I'm going to go ahead and rough cut these, and I'll do my second one now and pop that out. But that's why we love to use these natural foods that are great for sweetening. And isn't this wonderful compared to like white sugar, which is very processed, which has no nutrients. It has a lot of calories and no nutrients, and it can be addictive. Meanwhile, here you've got these wonderful dates that have great flavor and all this nutrition that comes with your sweetness. And so that's why a lot of recipes these days in the natural world uses dates as a sweetener. Now, I think that when we want to talk a little bit about buying, and you might have seen that I was using the first medjool date. I've got 2 other medjool dates over here, and these are fresh ones because you can buy medjool dates either fresh in the produce aisle or dried ones more over in the bulk section. Now, your grocery store may not have them, and so you might find just some kind of standard dates over in the baking section. That will probably work just fine. What you're probably going to get is what's called the Deglet date. Those are smaller. They're pitted already, which is kind of nice. But they're about as sweet as the medjools, but the thing is they're smaller. So if this is all you can get, you may have to do at least 1 or 2 extra ones to get the same degree of sweetness. Now this one is an Halawi date. I guess that's how they pronounce it. It's got the pit in it. And it's also smaller, so you'd have to use extra ones. I don't find this quite as sweet as the Deglet Noor, so you may have to add a little extra if you're using those. But all of these you can find in the bulk section. Best place to look for this kind of stuff is a health food store. Okay, so now we've got the dates in here. Now time to move on to the coconut. Bottom tip on the coconut, let's start with that, is the recipe calls for unsweetened coconut. And now, in the old days, it was kind of hard to find that. They were all sweetened. And, of course, we don't want to have sweetened because we're trying to get away from the processed sugars. And so what's nice about the unsweetened, it doesn't have that. It's not going to get some sugar snuck into your diet through the coconut. And, again, you can find these at a health food store pretty easily nowadays. But the thing to remember is to always be reading your ingredient labels. This is the flakes of coconut, but you can see that I'm looking at the ingredient label, all it contains is organic coconut flakes. That's what you want to be looking for. These days, sugar is snuck into so many different products, even things you wouldn't even suspect, like ketchup or salad dressings. So you always need to be really watching your ingredient listings and checking to make sure that there's no sugar added. And so for our coconut, what we're going to do is we're going to add our 2 tablespoons. And the recipe gives you an option of, let's see, my stove actually worked today. Sometimes it has a little trouble getting started. The recipe gives you an option of toasting the coconut, and it calls for 2 tablespoons. So we'll go ahead and put those in, and I'm just measuring in my hand here, which is fine if you pretty much know what you're after. The recipe gives an option to toast. If you don't have extra time, that's fine. You don't need to. But if you do have just a couple minutes, because that's about all it takes, it's a nice addition because toasting really brings out the flavor, not just of coconut, but of any nut. And so what that does is it adds more flavor to your dessert so that you don't have to rely on sweeteners so much. You get a good balanced flavor with all the different ingredients. And toasting is really easy. As you can see, what I did is I've got this little pan that I keep pretty much for toasting, and it heats up really quickly. And you don't need any oil or anything like that. You just put the dry pan on medium heat and put your coconut in there. But then comes the only hard part is keep an eye on it. Because for a while it'll look like, not that much is happening. But then all of a sudden it'll start getting a nice light brown. And then if you don't watch it, all of a sudden it will start to burn, which I have done many times. Another thing you can do is kind of look for it to get light brown, and then you can smell it, and it really brings out that wonderful coconut smell. And that's when you know that you've about got it done. So I'm going to go ahead. I could let this go just a little bit longer to get a little bit more brown, but I'm going to go ahead and just add it now because it's pretty well toasted. Go ahead and add that into our immersion blender. And now, as you can tell, and you can imagine, coconut is neither hard nor large. And so you're kind of wondering, well, why am I going to add that now and process it at this point? The reason that we're processing the dates at this point is, you remember tip number 2, which was when you have, or tip number 1, which was to, when you have a larger or harder item, do a rough cut with it. The reason for that is that it would be really hard, number 1, for my little tiny chopper to chop such a big thing. And number 2, to the extent that it could, by the time it got the whole date processed, the first part of the date that started processing would probably be turned to mush. So the whole reason of doing the rough cut is to make for more even cutting. And then the coconut, no, it doesn't need to be rough cut or given an extra chance to process. But what's nice about putting the coconut in there is that it kind of coats those sticky dates pieces so they don't turn just into a sticky glob in your food processor. So now we are ready to go ahead and process this. And this is where you're going to see tip numbers 2 and 3. And this could be just a little bit noisy, but I want you to see, oops, there goes a spoon. I want you to see how we do this pulsing. You don't just push this down and hold it. You do little bursts. And so watch this. Whoa. You can see it is noisy. Okay, so I did 3 little bursts, and you can tell that it's already starting to get down. But this is the point when we get to tip number 3, when we want to make sure that everything is pushed down where the blade is. Again, another tip to get even chopping. Same as why we rough cut. Okay, so now I'm going to do one more time. And I can tell that it's getting easier and easier, and so I can see in here that my dates are getting pretty well chopped. I'll probably do it one more time. And that's about making, because what we're trying to do is, and I can see this is really wonderful, I can see that my dates are down to about 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch. And now we're ready to go ahead to step 2 of the recipe, which is to add the strawberries and then the flavorings. Now, and it's right here, these are the ingredients that it involves, and what we do is we add the strawberries, cocoa powder, cinnamon, and mint if using, and then we're going to blend or process again to achieve the desired texture. Now, you might be wondering, Mary, why didn't we just throw everything in the processor and just do it all at once? I mean, that would have been easier, right? Well, the reason is that we talked about how these dates, they're pretty large, they're pretty tough. Well, strawberries are quite soft. So you can imagine that if we tried to put these together, by the time the date would get processed, you saw how long that took. Our poor strawberries would have been just mush. They would have been juiced. And, you know, if you wanted a juice drink, well, that's fine. But as I mentioned, I like desserts with a little more substance to them, and I think you will too. And so that's why we give a head start to the dates, and then we'll add the strawberries, and then at that point they'll both be done at about the same time, and not one of them won't be turned to juice in the meantime. And now for the strawberries, again, we're getting back to that tip number 1. Remember where we do a rough cut, because they're kind of large and we don't want to put those into the processor without cutting them first. And while I'm cutting these, I want to talk a little bit about buying tips. And with strawberries, there's a real danger lurking in the strawberry aisle, and that's the pesticide contamination that can come on strawberries. And so the buying tip I want to offer is to have an organic buying strategy when it comes to strawberries. And the reason for that is that of all the produce, strawberries is the #1 worst in terms of pesticide contamination. And so let me just read a little bit of information on this, and then I put more information under this video, because I hope I can convince you that this is something to really watch out for. But according to the USDA tests found that strawberries were the fresh produce item most likely to be contaminated with pesticide residues even after they're picked, rinsed in the field, and washed before eating. So you can't protect yourself. Now, and here's a specific piece of data. Conventionally grown strawberries contained an average of 7.8 different pesticides per sample, compared to 2.1 pesticides for samples of all other produce. So what you see is that with strawberries, you get almost 3 times the pesticide loads. And I know that it's really tough when spring comes and you start seeing those big flats of strawberries for like $1.99 or $2.99. It's really tempting, isn't it? But remember that when growers are giving you produce that's that inexpensive, it's coming at a cost, and the cost is your health. So when it comes to buying strawberries, I know not everybody has the dollars to buy everything organic, but that's one of the reasons why you want to know what are some of the worst, so you can prioritize some of your organic dollars there. And there's a group called the Environmental Working Group, which every year comes out with a report of the Dirty Dozen, and those are the produce items that are the worst in terms of pesticides. So those can be where you prioritize your organic dollars. And what's interesting about strawberries, and why I'm really warning you about this, is that year after year after year, strawberries always top the list. So these are bad guys. So what I want you to think about is buying them organic, and I know that can be hard, but I want you to think about clean quality rather than big and tempting quantity. So let's go ahead then. We've got these cut up now. We can throw them into our processor here. And then at this point, we can go ahead and add the cocoa and the cinnamon. And this isn't much. Fortunately, this is a pretty easy part of the recipe. We just put in our cocoa, and that's just a matter of measuring it, and then our cinnamon. And it can be a little bit difficult to measure tiny amounts of cinnamon. I'm using a 1/16 teaspoon and using half of it to get 1/8 of a teaspoon. Now, the big reason that I added these initially was because they added a nice flavor punch to my strawberry dessert. But you must know, too, that both cinnamon and cocoa have wonderful health benefits. And so we won't go into those, but I'm going to put a couple links down below this video so that you can take a look at them. But I just hope you're seeing that this dessert has the potential for being really positively helpful. Not just not a nutritional black hole, but also positively helpful for you, because look at all the good stuff and the good nutrition that you're getting in it. So then the last thing to add is a leaf of mint. Now I added mint to my dessert because, again, it kind of boosts the flavor with no calories and more nutrition. And also, mint is something that comes into season right when strawberries do, and they pair really nicely together. Now, and then the third reason, of course, is that I have mint all over my garden right now, so it's like, yes, find some uses for it. Well, what if you don't have mint in your garden? No problem, you can buy it at the store, and you might go, oh gosh, but it's so expensive, and then what will I do with it? There are so many uses for mint. This spring I've been making mint with green peas and mint, wonderful recipe. For one of our recent classes, we made kale with a tahini mint sauce. Wonderful things, you can make mint yogurt sauces. You can put it even in your tea. So don't be afraid to buy a package of mint and enjoy that wonderful, fresh, early spring, summer flavor with it. And then if all else fails too, I've got a little bottle of mint extract that you could use a couple drops of that if you like it. But mint is a really powerful herb. That's why I'm only putting in a leaf of this. And if you're going to use the extract, I mean, just like a drop or two. So be very, very mindful of it. It can be very powerful. Well, so now we've got everything in our dessert that we need. It's time to process again. And this is where tips 1 and 2 come back. Remember, we're going to just process in those pulses, and when we need to, we're going to scrape down the sides of the bowl and make sure that all the ingredients get incorporated evenly. So here we go again. You can see that it's not nearly as noisy because the strawberries are pretty easy to process. They're very soft. Now, I'm keeping an eye on it though, because remember your instructions told you do it to your desired texture. And now for me, I want mine a little chunkier, but you might like it a little smoother. So I'm going to do mine one more and take a look at it. And mine is still a little bit too chunky, but what I want to do is stop, scrape it down, get the outside stuff into the inside stuff, into the inside part of the processor. So again, we're trying to make sure it gets evenly mixed. A food processor doesn't automatically mix things evenly. You have to do that work yourself. So I'm going to do just a little bit more, and then this is perfect for me. It's got just a little bit of texture, but it's still pretty smooth. So good. Now a part of the recipe comes that often isn't written in a recipe, but it's absolutely critical to every recipe you make, not just this one. And that's the taste and adjust instruction. You have to know that in the way that a recipe is written, there's no way that it appeals to everyone who tries it. At the most, it might appeal to 25% of people. So that's why tasting and adjusting to make it suit your taste is so important. And you simply get your spoon out and take a little taste and see, well, maybe does it need a little more? Maybe I was using these dates and maybe it needs a little more sweetener because I used one of the less sweet or smaller dates. Maybe it needs more cocoa. I'd like it a little bit more chocolatey, or maybe a little more cinnamon, maybe a little more mint. Those are the things that you get to play with once you taste and adjust. For me, the thing I want to try is putting in just the tiniest pinch of salt and seeing if that helps bring out the flavor like it does in savory dishes. So that might be what I experiment with this one. Now comes serving, and all the experts will tell you that it's really nice to get a nice serving bowl and put your dessert in it, and then of course sit down and enjoy it. There's a lot of really interesting research these days about how important it is to really slow down when we eat, of course, and to enjoy it, because we find that that really makes us feel much more satisfied so that we don't have cravings afterwards. It is also really good for our digestion. Now, having said that, I will tell you that I have on occasion taken the blade out of here and used this as my nice pretty bowl so I don't have two things to wash. But I always do try to sit down and make sure I really enjoy it, and I hope you do too. So I want to tell you about some really fun creative possibilities with this recipe, that it really opens up some fun things that you can do. But first, I want to go back to those two questions that I asked you at the beginning. Remember, the first one was, why is this so easy for me to make this? The first time I made it in like 2 minutes. Well, you might have run across some recipes that were supposedly easy to make, but then in reality, not so much. What you have to realize is that it's not just a short list of ingredients or short instructions that make a recipe easy. In addition, it's really important, like, do you have the right ingredients? Are they handy and easy to access? Do you have the right equipment? Do you know how to use it? Do you have some clean kitchen spaces to be able to work in? These are all what are called the kitchen smart strategies and skills. Remember, I mentioned those earlier. I said we'd talk about them. That's what these are. And here's a surprising thing. Those are 60% of successful cooking. Now, let's take a look at my kitchen. I'm just going to move this aside just a little bit here so we can see in my kitchen what's going on and why in my kitchen it is really easy to put something like this together. So, for instance, to begin with, I try to keep my counters clear of pretty much all the junk so that I have a lot of room to work in. It can be discouraging to come into a kitchen where the counters are all cluttered and you don't really have room to cook. So that's number one. Then I have a pantry with lots of fun things in it, so that when I get some fresh strawberries, for instance, I have some really fun things to put with it and make a dessert like this really quickly. What I always say is that a good pantry equals great possibilities. And then I've organized things in my pantry so that they're really easy to find. For instance, I always get like with like, put things in predictable places so that you can find them easily. For instance, if I need cinnamon, they're right down here with all of my spices in the spice drawer. The dates in my chocolate are right here in my baking center. The coconut I keep with all of my nuts over in the refrigerator. I keep them in these nice labeled containers, and I keep them in the fridge so that they don't get rancid. Really easy to pull them out. Those are the kind of things you want to think about. These are the little things that add up to make cooking really smooth and efficient. Another thing is just having the right equipment. I have the immersion blender. I have my little toasting skillet that I keep right under the stove. I've got spatulas, I've got good knives, I know how to use them. That's the other thing, is knowing how to use these tools, and that's why I wanted to share these tips with you for how do you use that chopper blade. How can you use your knives so that you maximize their effectiveness in your kitchen? So all of these things together, as I say, they're like the foundation of your kitchen. And I wonder if you're surprised to learn that those are 60% of healthy cooking and success in the kitchen. And so what that means is that, the part of measuring out ingredients and mixing them up, that's only 40% of what you do in the kitchen. The other 60% is whether you're set up with this foundation. A lot of people don't even know that. A lot of people don't have it set up, and that's a lot of why you have trouble making meal making manageable for yourself. So that's question number one. Question number two is, remember I asked you to notice what information I'm going to be sharing with you that isn't written in the recipe. And for instance, this is like, the tips on using a food processor, how to toast nuts and coconut, buying tips, what to watch out for with strawberries. I'm sure you've probably heard the phrase of reading between the lines. And that's kind of what we've got going on here. In a recipe, there's a lot of information that's in between the lines. And recipe writers don't want to write all of that out because it would make the recipe really long and awkward and you wouldn't want to follow it. So they kind of assume that you have a little bit of knowledge and that you'll be able to read in between the lines. But sometimes we don't always have that knowledge. And so that's why I was excited with just this simple recipe. We could have just thrown it together, but I used it as a learning opportunity for you to find some of that information and to begin adding that to your cooking knowledge database so that you can use it for all of the cooking that you do. Well, I want to ask you a question. Would you like to be able to cook meals and dishes and recipes like this, really cook quickly and successfully? How about making real food meals smoothly and efficiently? Be able to do that every day, no big deal. How about being able to replace stress and uncertainty at meal times with comfort and confidence in the kitchen? Well, good news, because my annual summer camp for big people is coming up August 6th through 10th. And there we're going to be learning about the new kitchen way, which is a new approach to cooking in the kitchen to make it manageable so you can get those healthy meals on the table every day. The new kitchen way has three main pillars: being new in the kitchen, being new with our cooking, and being new in our thinking. Now, being new in the kitchen gets into that whole kitchen smart skills and strategies that we talked about. With those, we can turn the kitchen from foe to friends. And you'll be able to see how that 60-40 secret works, become aware of it, and be able to put that to work for you to make your kitchen a supportive environment for cooking those healthy meals. Then we're going to be learning about being new in the kitchen. You know, what's interesting about cooking is that there's only like 5 or 6 main techniques. And with those, you can make hundreds of healthy dishes really easily. So what we're going to be learning is those basic techniques, but also a lot of those tips and tricks that I talked about that weren't mentioned in the recipes that I've talked to you about today. You're going to be learning a lot more of those to build your cooking knowledge database, so that whenever you face a recipe, you've got a great knowledge base to work from to make you a comfortable and confident cook. And then finally, we're going to be learning about being new in the kitchen. This is kind of an unusual one that you might not have thought about. But what we're going to be doing is learning how we have been conditioned to see meal making as a struggle, when instead, what if your head could be behind your actions and your thinking be supportive of your efforts in the kitchen? This would make it so much easier to get in the kitchen and make those healthful meals to support us. So I want you to imagine, if you've got this kind of foundation in place, can you imagine the wonderfully healthful meals that you're going to make and the wonderful health that you'll enjoy by having those wonderful healthy meals each day, day in and day out? So I want you to check down below this video. You're going to find the link to find out more about my summer camp for big people, and I hope you'll check it out, and I hope you'll do that soon, because the camp is going to be held right here in my kitchen, and it's going to be just a small group. So very intimate, very fun, but there's only 6 spots. So don't delay. Take a look at that link right away, and if you want to join, get right on it, because like I say, there's only going to be 6 spots. So now I want to go back and talk just a little bit. I promised to talk to you a little bit about how you could be creative with this recipe. Really, view this as kind of just an outline, and then you can put different pieces into it. Starting with fruits. I use strawberries because they were in season in spring, but think about as the season goes on, sweet cherries are coming into season now. Peaches are going to come into season, blueberries. All of those would be really good alternatives to strawberries as we go along with the season, and you're going to get the best fruit if you eat the fruit that's in season. Maybe you want to put some different spices in. Maybe some nutmeg with the peaches. Maybe some cardamom with the cherries. Maybe you want to try some different nuts. Maybe sliced almonds with the peaches, or think about pecans with the cherries. So you can see how much variety you can get with one simple recipe. And once you've learned it, think how easy it's going to be to just repeat it, but just put different parts and pieces into the outline. So I hope you'll try this recipe. I hope you'll enjoy it. I hope you'll get creative and try some other things. And I really hope that you will check out the link below this video about my summer camp for big people that's coming right up. I want to thank you all for joining me today. It's been great. I hope you learned a lot, that you've gotten some really good ideas. And thank you for joining me, and bye for now.